So Nelson, great to see you again. So as it goes at a Phocuswright conference, there's always a lot of discussion about Google on the stage. So
No.
we won't get into any of the specific comments, but I'd love you to just start by sharing from your perspective, what is Google's role in the travel industry?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, honor to be here. So great to see so many of you in the room. It's an honor. And yeah, thank you. Just to level set, it's relatively simple. Our mission is really centered around two things. The first of which is the simplification of the travel trip planning, right? And then ultimately driving value and business outcomes for our partners, right? And at the end of the day, we seek to be a trusted partner who provides extremely useful information that users can both in a very fast and effortless way book travel plans. It's really that simple.
Great. So the way we're going to structure this session is you've released some research, I think today actually, on some trends and themes that you're seeing in the marketplace. Phocuswright's a research company. We track consumer behavior quite frequently. So we'll kind of bring up some of these trends that we're seeing in the market, and then maybe talk a little bit about how Google positions products and helps your partners map up against some of these trends. So sure. The first one is pent-up demand and experiences. It's obviously been a nice run for the travel industry for the last 6 to 9 months, right?
Yes.
Travel is sitting at the top of the list from a discretionary spend perspective. We see that in our survey data. I'm curious, what sort of trends are you seeing in the search data that kind of align with that point?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I think some of you will recall from the last time that I was here that 56% of surveyed Americans plan to make a meaningful life or kind of a decision or moment over the next 2 years. As part of that, as you can imagine, travel was going to be a big part of it. We've seen that pent-up demand play out, with strong search demand and intensity across the last 9 months, to your point. Certainly for the majority of the year, that has played out. As it relates to upcoming holiday travel, about 40% of those who are planning holiday travel are planning on spending at least as much as they have done, if not more, than they did in the past 2 years. And so that momentum is continuing. In the summer months or leading up to the summer months, there was a 200% increase globally in searches around different travel destinations for the summer. In early April and March, we were seeing queries around the notion of cheap destinations or cheap countries to go to, 7,000% year over year. So this pent-up demand continues, and at Google, it's our desire to make sure that we are meeting the desire to take advantage of that demand through our automation products, allowing folks to really kind of take advantage of that.
So curious, what should we be looking for? Obviously, there's some challenging news in the market about potential recession. We're still seeing strong demand through the travel channels. What sort of what should we be looking for maybe if we start to see some shifts in that pent-up demand, maybe shifting to spend on other things?
Yeah, look, I think one of the things that we try to make sure that we do to help our partners and consumers through those times, on the user side, for example, we've helped to provide research information around best time to make flight bookings, for example, and other cost-saving information. Beyond that, for our partners, as I've mentioned, automation is really important as you think about how to try to find pockets of demand in disruptive times and really take advantage of that in a way that helps you to find those highest value customers in times of disruption. Through the pandemic, the mentality hasn't really changed from the kind of mindset that we were seeing of those companies that were being successful in those times. Those that were insights-led, those that were data-driven, and those that were agile were the ones that really not only maintained position through the pandemic, but really set themselves up for recovery through the pandemic. None of us have a crystal ball as to what's next, but I think those that are leaned into automation as a way to kind of, level the waves, if you will be the ones that are most prepared for what's next.
So we've also seen a shift in spend away from consumable products to experiences. That's a trend that we've seen in our data. I know you've seen the same in yours. So are you thinking about this as a permanent behavior change, or would your recommendation to the marketers in the audience be exactly as you stated before, be smart, be nimble, follow the data?
It's a yes and.
Yes and.
Right. So on the first part, I think one of the interesting trends that we're seeing in regard to how we're perceiving experiences as an important place to spend time is, there seems to have been somewhere along the way, millennials and the thought about millennials and Gen Z has been, they don't really have a lot of money or they're not really spending. What's interesting about those groups is that they have been kind of leading the way, both in terms of the vitalness of experiences in the travel journey, but also in leading this notion of blended travel, where you've got both business and leisure being combined into a singular trip. And I think that has, quite frankly, massive implications for travel marketers, not only in the continued curation and cultivation of their first-party data, understanding, by the way, that there are challenges that exist with trying to identify blended travelers, but at the same time, really kind of the opportunity to reconsider their marketing messages as it relates to moving away from kind of traditional inspiration, traditional discounts and or seasonality, to one of really thinking about how marketing messages may better play to recognizing this new dynamic.
So I want to get to blended travel in a little bit, but I first want to ask about Things to Do.
Yeah.
So Things to Do was launched fairly recently, and I'm curious if the thought process behind the product launch was around the digitization of that particular segment of the industry. So was that kind of the thought process, that tours and activities are becoming much more digitized, and Google, should play a role in helping connect a traveler with an experience? Can you talk a little bit about Things to Do and kind of what's the strategy behind it?
Sure. I think it's kind of another yes and, if I could. Things to Do is an area that we're going to continue to invest in as it relates to having that opportunity to go deeper dive into what's available, in an experience in market when you're there, being able to take advantage of those things, like our hotel products in the past. And by the way, it's still a work in progress. It's got some time for continued development, but like our hotel products, we are looking to also make sure that we're bringing in all the right both pricing information and product information that is representative of the ecosystem. It actually parallels nicely with the notion of the blended traveler, right? When we think about someone who may be in a destination for which they would not have been had it not been for the business travel, but they want to understand the things that they can do when they have downtime, either before or after. I mean, think about this, 50% of business travelers have already done some level of blended travel, and 37% are considering doing that. I'd like to take a unofficial poll of the room. I would not be surprised if there are some folks in this room right now who have a set of golf bags sitting in their rooms, or you either kind of tacked on 3 days before this or are tacking on 3 days after, or some kind of function thereof. Just a quick show of hands.
There's a lot of liars out there.
But a decent number, and I think it kind of speaks to the fact that this is a phenomenon for which Things to Do, more micro but macro, certainly plays a role.
And do you think blended travel is, we've been talking about bleisure for quite some time. Do you think blended travel is here to stay, or is it more of a flash in the pan. Obviously, the pandemic kind of fueled that type of behavior because workers were working from anywhere. They're starting to be pulled back into the office.
Yep.
What's your thought on whether it's something that's a permanent shift in behavior?
I absolutely think it's permanent. And by the way, I don't think it's a flash in the pan. I think we were already doing this. I mean, certainly for those of us that have been business travelers, and this has implications on loyalty too, by the way, right? Business travelers, we were using loyalty points for the notion of leisure travel. Now we can actually do those things in combination with one another. And I think the pandemic, as a function of what it represented, particularly in creating some flexibility around working considerations, actually made it a bit more of an easy thing to kind of consider and get into. And when you think about the notion of loyalty, we've seen spikes this past July and June, certainly as an example for places like Marriott Bonvoy or for Hilton Honors, where that was in combination with a lot of business travel. So it almost kind of begs the question around the opportunity that marketers may have to, how do I continue to amplify messaging around loyalty programs, particularly knowing that there's this traveler that may be doing a bit of both, and how can I continue to amplify different aspects, amenities, certain things about properties that make that travel even easier to do, but not a flash in the pan, something that's going to be around for quite some time.
So what are marketers doing? What are effective marketers doing to help, to attract that? It's a lucrative traveler base, right? So this is a high-spending traveler base.
Yeah.
So what are effective marketers doing to attract that? Is it easy for you to identify that type of traveler, or are they employing certain strategies to bring more of that blended traveler into their?
To be honest, I think a lot of it remains to be seen. I can't point necessarily to any particular marketer that is doing it well. I think it's a kind of green shoots, open field as to what could come next. I think we've all had the benefit as focus group of us right here in this JW Marriott, where we can see that this is the type of place that certainly is allowing for that type of thing. You got good internet speed, a FedEx office, and a golf course, right? And so I think companies' abilities to be able to promote and highlight those types of amenities and those types of things in regard to their loyalty program, existing loyalty programs would be very significant in trying to continue to bolster that and to drive that through.
Great. So I want to shift to the future of search and digital. So last year you talked about the route to ready, I think is the term that you used, as you mapped out the importance of digital transformation.
Yep.
To improve nimbleness for travel companies. Have you seen them embracing that? Was that message heard?
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to take credit, but I certainly have seen it be embraced. The thing I had commented on is those companies that were both surviving through the pandemic and really positioning themselves to accelerate through recovery were those that were data-driven, insights-led, and agile. And there are certain companies that certainly fit that bill. When, kind of immediately I think about Marriott and Wyndham as two examples, both of which really utilized first-party and third-party data very effectively in being able to both target and engage even on-site through experiences and so forth, the relationships, deepening those relationships that they have with their partners. Wyndham in particular, Lisa, who's their CMO, and their CFO, really came together and created a common language and alignment between what had been, previously siloed parts of the organization around common goals, common alignment, customer value, and customer engagement to really drive their goals and objectives through. Celebrity, as another example, is one where their CEO kind of said, we don't want the comeback to be, we want the comeback to be stronger than the setback. And for them, that was really kind of a message around changing creative, looking at a younger group of audiences to try to change and pivot towards something new, working with our creative works team to really kind of reevaluate what that looks like and to move the ships, no pun, forward.
No pun intended.
No.
Another topic that we've heard a few times here today, and we've heard for the last 10, 15 years, is that concept of personalization. And you mentioned personalization last year as one of the challenges of our industry. So I'm curious, has any progress been made on that front in the past year?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, privacy is hand in hand with personalization is generally kind of regulated by three things, right? There's user expectation, there is kind of technical constraint, different companies doing different things in the space, and there's always the regulatory element of it all. But for the purposes of this conversation, talking about the user expectation as being really key, 81% of people, not surprisingly, are concerned about how their data is used, right? But interestingly enough, at the same time, 3 out of 4 people want more personalization in the messages that they receive. I don't think these two things are necessarily in conflict with one another. It's incumbent upon travel marketers and people in this space to first and foremost be transparent, right, with users in terms of how that data is being used, but secondarily, give them control and choice over that personalization. Google actually more recently has what we call my advertising center, which allows for our users to kind of toggle up or toggle down the messages that they receive on a categorical basis. Travel would be one of those examples. And I think as marketers, travel personalization will always be important, which continues to emphasize the importance of curation and utilization of first-party data.
So speaking of personalization, I want to touch on shift in behavior. So I'm going to share a quick story with you, and then I'd love to hear your reaction to it. So
sure.
I was in Italy last summer and traveling with my family.
So was I. I think perhaps half of this room was in Italy.
Many folks from the States were in Italy last summer.
Right.
So we were traveling through Naples, and I asked my daughter to find us a restaurant for lunch, and immediately she pulled up TikTok. That was her first move, was to pull up TikTok and find a restaurant. She flipped over to Instagram to really check it out and look at the vibe of it. So you've obviously got YouTube as a product, but I'm curious, is that a concern of yours that the younger generations are shifting towards more social and visual search, or do you feel like you have a product in YouTube that serves that purpose?
I think we have products that ultimately service that need, and I'm glad the whole notion of the millennial and the Gen Zer is an interesting one as it related to blended travel, right? And the one thing I didn't mention is what you just beautifully articulated, which is their kind of reliance on inspiration from both video and social as a function of doing so. At Google, what does that mean? Well, clearly as we continue to evolve search products and so forth, I think you'll see a lot more as it relates to visual search in the SERP. And as it relates to YouTube, our Shorts product has taken off quite well. And there's certainly the combination between that short form and long form, which I think really tells a very cohesive and nice story arc around how people can be inspired by the notion of travel. Look, we're always cognizant of the competition, but at the end of the day, like I mentioned up in the beginning, our primary concern is less about that and more so about making sure that our products and solutions are delivering upon the notion of travel trip planning and simplification, and ultimately continuing to drive value to our advertising partners.
What I didn't say at the end of the story is I then picked up Google Maps, checked out reviews, and made sure that restaurant was appropriate.
Thank you.
So I know we've got about a minute left, and I'd love to finish with a game of this or that. So I'll give you a couple of choices, and you can just choose what's better for you. So.
Okay.
We're going to start off with...
I'm a little nervous now.
We're going to start off with sustainability trends. So net zero by 2050 or no chance?
Oh, absolutely. Hopefully prior to 2050.
Short form video or search?
Search. And I'm just speaking for myself now.
All right, let's go easy here. Snow or sun?
Sun.
TikTok or YouTube?
YouTube.
Another softball.
Yeah.
Thinking about the last session, Web 2 or Web 3?
Web 3.
AI or metaverse?
AI.
Travelers, titans, or trailblazers?
Travelers.
Ladies and gentlemen, Nelson Boyce.